Alright guys, welcome to the channel. Hopefully welcome back. If you saw part one, you know what we're doing. If not, maybe go back and watch it. If you look to the far left here, that is our 150 watt solar panel. It's bringing in 29 watts at 1.7 amps. In the center, we're showing 222, 221 watts, 2.3 amps, and then the right, similar numbers. So the center panel is three 375 watt panels wired in series, and then the far right is the same. All right, so we had a big thunderstorm. It's very cloudy out, and this is a great time to do a video on overpaneling. You can see that, you know, we have 232, 216 watts pretty consistently, and these strings are capable of putting out as much as 1,125 watts, and we're not getting it. But if we have more panels, we might be able to do better than what we're doing right now. So what we're going to do is take this whole unit outside, my little wagon wheelbarrow, and we're going to go directly to the panels and see, are we losing a lot of input from this 160 foot long run of 10 gauge wire in here, or are the numbers the same? Let's find out. Let's check it out and see what's going on. And then after we do that, we're going to take a fourth 375 watt panel, and we're going to wire 4 panels in series parallel and then see what the output is at the panels, and then we're going to check and see what it is in here. So we're going to do some testing. We're going to see what kind of improvements we might get. Are we experiencing any voltage loss both ways? So let's get it going. Okay, so I got the Pecron unit and the tripod in there. Let's take a look at the skies. As you can see, it's pretty thick, dense clouds. I'm hoping that me getting this stuff set up isn't really going to change the outcome of what's going on, but you can see it's a very, very dense, cloudy situation, and I'm going to get up here and get set up before maybe we start getting more sun than what we had, and it skews the results. All right, well, let's check out what we've got. I've got one string hooked up, and it's got, I guess, a 10-foot little extension cord plus this 2. So this would be 12 feet of 10 gauge wire. All right, so I've had this plugged in for a little bit so it can stabilize. It looks like, to me, the voltage is slightly higher, the amperage is lower, and so is the watt output. Now, you know, have things changed as far as cloud cover goes? You know what? It's possible. You know, it was looking more like this when we had the 220 watts, and now it's kind of looking a little thicker. You know, I'm gonna say that is inconclusive. It's really hard to say, but there's a good possibility that at this amperage with this voltage, that the 10 gauge 160 foot run is not creating much of a difference as far as the actual voltage, amperage, and wattage that we're seeing at the unit. I'm going to try the line for the 150 watt panel next and see what goes on there. All right, well, I've got this 150 watt panel hooked up directly here, very short run, and it looks like 18 watts, 1.5 amps, 11.9 volts DC. So I mean, I don't mean to keep showing you the same stuff, but I think the cloud cover, if you look, has got a little bit denser. It seems like it's coming from this direction and going out to that direction. So we had cloud cover that was more like that originally. So I think we've gotten slightly more cloud cover. I'm just going to go ahead and say that I think we're not experiencing any voltage drop in this 160 foot run from the harbor hut to these panels out here. So that we verified that, but now I'm going to wire 4 panels. I'm going to wire 4 panels for these 375 watt panels in series parallel and hook it up out here. Now we're going to be double the amperage So we're going to see what we got out here, and then we're going to take this unit back inside and we're going to see what we get inside, okay? And we're going to compare that to what we have out here and see, when we double the amperage, are we actually having a loss of wattage due to the increased current flow through this 10 gauge wiring, going from around 10 amps to around 20 amps. So let's get that going and let's see what we got going on there. All right guys, so now we're going to wire this front string in series parallel. We're going to add those branch connectors, and we're also going to put those inline fuses in. So I'm going to go ahead and hook this up, and that's what you're going to be seeing going on. So we've got these 4 375 watt panels wired in series parallel. Let's check out what we got going on. So we are now at about 265 watts. We were previously at around 199 or whatever. So we've increased about 66 watts. You can see the voltage has dropped because we are now in series parallel. We've gone down quite a bit, and the amperage you can see is much higher. We're at 4 amps right now. So when you wire in series parallel, you will get some different effects than what you'll get in series. You will have increased amperage and lower voltage. So if you want to look into that more, you can see some other videos on YouTube about that. Maybe I'll do a little tutorial later. There's a lot to explain there, but we're just out here in the field, so to speak, and I'm trying to do some real quick basic results before it starts raining again. So if or the solar conditions change. So what I'm going to do now is, now that we're getting what I'm going to call a good stable reading of these panels in series parallel, I am going to take this Pecron unit back inside, hook it up like it normally is. We're going to go in there and see, are we getting any voltage loss as far as watts go? That could be due to increased resistance in the circuit. And we'll also plug this other line back in that's in series and compare what are the differences in the performance between these two in this heavy, cloudy, rainy situation. Let's do it. All right, well, it is actively raining now. So we were at like 266 watts before. We're down to like 258 now. But if you look at the difference between these two, you know, we're toggling around 199, 200. So that's just say we're about 65, 70 watts more on the series parallel string as opposed to the string with 3 panels in series. Now we have added a 375 watt panel, and under these conditions, you know, it seems like, you know, if you're doing basic math, we're getting maybe 65 watts or so per panel. So having the extra panel in the mix at this time is definitely making a difference. And you might say, hey, you know, 66, 70 watts more, what's the big deal? You know, I've got Starlink here. This, I believe, operates at between like 30 and 60 watts. You know, the Pecron E3600LFP unit, while the AC inverter is on, is, you know, has idle consumption. It sounds like that's typically around 30 or 40 watts. So this could make the difference in just this one line, and being able to cover the Starlink and or, you know, just the idle consumption of the Pecron unit. But if we had both of these lines hooked up, we'd have another 140 watts, you know? So that's a big difference when you're in these dismal, rainy conditions. Like I said, it's actively raining right now. You can see our 150 watt panel still only putting out like around 19 watts. So if we had both of these in series parallel right now, you know, that would be a considerable gain, and it would just be a little more helpful in, you know, keeping something in the batteries. So I think I'm going to check back in with you guys under more ideal conditions and see what we got going on there, and we can talk more about what advantages we might get by over paneling. So we're going to be running into a situation when we're at like peak sunlight where this thing is only going to limit us to 1200 watts of solar input. So having the extra wattage isn't going to help us then. That's what they call solar clipping. So it's going to be clipping off our max potential wattage at peak sun times, but we are going to be getting more input at times where, you know, 3 panels isn't just enough, but having that 4th panel will make the difference. And you can see that the difference that just a 4th panel is making right now. Under these conditions, it may not seem huge, but it is very different. You know, you can see it's right about 70 watts now, more than the other one. So, hey man, 70 watts is 70 watts. All right, well, let's take a look at what we originally had. This is 3 panels wired in series. As you can see, you've got the positive to the far left, the negative hooks to the positive, that negative hooks to the positive, and then you have the negative. So you have one positive hooking up and one negative hooking up to either end of the strings there. So in our case, 375 watt panels, 1,125 watts. And one thing that these calculators don't really show or ask for is your voltage open circuit. Now, these panels, if I was to add a 4th, I would be over my voltage. I wouldn't be over the voltage as far as the panel's concerned, but I would be over on open circuit voltage. And that's not mentioned in the calculator, and it should be in there. So I'm going to post a couple of video links in the description so you can see different ways to calculate panels, and I'm going to put some links for the calculator so you can see on your own too. You got to be real careful with this stuff, because if you figure it out wrong, you could damage your system permanently to where it just doesn't work anymore, or you could cause a fire. So it's really important to know how to calculate your panels, voltages, and amperages, and using the correct wires. So let's move on to the configuration that we just put one string in. All right, well, let's move on to the series parallel configuration. As you can see here, we have 4 panels. Now, we do get to add up the wattage on all 4 panels. So we are getting the wattage of 4 panels. But just like we did in the series circuit, you have 2 panels in series. And then you can see now the difference is we have another 2 panels in series. And then we are connecting each positive lead, 2 positive leads, going through the fuses to the branch connector, and then it's one out. So basically what we get to do here is we get to take the open circuit voltage of 2 panels instead of 4. The drawback is that we're doubling the amperage. So we're going to be at double the amperage, and we're going to be at half of the open circuit voltage, and then we're going to be actually at half of the circuit voltage in general. So we get to add more watts without going over open circuit voltage. That's the main thing I'm going for. Now, the drawback is we're doubling the amperage. I have 10 gauge wire. I would prefer to have 8 gauge wire on the other side of that branch connector you see there. So this is the calculator for series versus series parallel. And you can see the differences here. Now, 1200 watts is our max, and our goal is to over panel, which is an additional 300 watts. It's not that much. I'd like to be over panel more. I just can't get panels right now that will work for what we're trying to do without going over on the amperage too high. So you can see here, we've doubled the amperage by going into the series parallel, but it's allowing us to get more wattage in. And it's actually more than 300 watts because we're really at 1125 right now. But this is definitely going to be helpful, and I think that we're going to be safe with our 10 gauge wire. The run is a little bit long. However, based on what I'm seeing here, this is saying that the one set of wires that I have is rated for 1500 watts DC and up to 50 amps. Now the other one doesn't have a rating. I did some general like Google searching, and it seemed like other people or sources were saying that 10 gauge wire was generally good for 25 or 30 amps. This one's saying 50 amps. I don't know if it's the specific type of wire or what the deal is, but I think we're going to be very safe at the 21 point whatever it was amps. So we are doubling the amperage, but I don't think that it's at a point that the wire cannot handle, but I still would prefer the 8 gauge. Alright guys, so I'm going to do a little recording here. It's like 1 o'clock now, and I've been seeing some of the highest readings on the solar input that I've seen so far. We've hit like 1100 and change here and there. So what I'm going to do is, since I don't have like a super scientific way to test this, like if we are losing wattage between here and the panels, this would be the best time to check, because it's going to cap us off somewhere just above 1200 watts. So if I check now and we're getting pegged at like 1250 or 1260 or something like that, we know that we're definitely losing wattage to voltage drop. So you can see where we're at. And I'm not going to test the 150 watt panel because I'm not really too particularly interested in that at the moment. It just is what it is. But yeah, so we can see what the readings are here. You know, I'm going to probably let this go on time lapse for a minute just so we can get a good baseline, and then we'll move outside. Okay, so I think we saw our peak reading for what we got going on. Let's go outside now and do just like what I'm going to call a little sky condition check, if you will. I would say a little hazy with a lot of fluffy cloud cover. So before things change too much, I'm going to get the unit up there and let's check it at the panels. Alright guys, I don't know if things have, cleared up a bit. Excuse the reflection of the phone on here. I'm doing the best that I can. This so far is the highest reading that I've seen. Now, I'm not sure if it's because we've gotten better sunlight, if you will, but it's not what I would consider terribly higher than the peak that we saw inside. Now, I'm just going to give you a view of the sky of what we've got going on at this time. You can see the angle of the sun. That's just focus on what we've got going on here and see if we can get to the point of where it actually starts solar clipping, if you will, because we're just kind of getting real close to the 1200 mark, and it would be interesting to see where this thing starts clipping at. I've heard other people say that it'll start clipping at about 1250 watts. So I'm interested to see if we actually get to see that under this condition. All right, sorry about that. My phone overheated. So yeah, I'm seeing 1196 here at 18.2 amps. We just hit 1200 at 18.2 amps. This is the highest input that we've seen so far, but the sun is really coming through real clear now. The only difference that I'm really noticing here is that we're about 1 amp less at this voltage than we were previously. So I don't know what to say about that. This is not what I would call the most scientific test, but at this point in time, I would say that this 10 gauge wire at 160 feet does not appear to be having either any effect on the performance or not at least a measurable effect on the performance with just these rudimentary techniques that I'm using. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing hooked back up, and while I was waiting for the phone to cool off, I did hook the other array up into series parallel. So now I think I'm done my basic testing phase to see what the differences were. The differences were measurable, they were worthwhile, so I'm going to go back inside and get this thing set back up. Alright guys, well, you can definitely see that there are more amps in here. We were, what was it again? Refresh my memory, I'll have to look when I'm editing. But I think we were at like 17 or 18 amps outside, and we're seeing 20, 21 inside. Now, this is what I was anticipating and seeing based on the solar calculators, if you know what I mean. Now, you can see over here, excuse my finger, we are at 2439 total watts in. We haven't reached a point of solar clipping yet. I believe, from what I understand, we should be able to see around 1250, excuse me, per input before it starts clipping. So what I'm going to do is put you guys on time lapse, and we're going to see if we can actually hit the point of solar clipping. And I don't know if it's going to happen today. It's the right time of day for it to happen, but if I don't know if it'll happen today with the cloud cover we got. But either way, you can see that we're definitely getting a very considerable gain by over paneling, but I think we're under over paneled. So after we get through this time lapse, I'm going to talk about I guess what would be this is phase 2, because you know we already had the 6 panels in series. Now we're doing the series parallel. Once we get done doing the time lapse, let's talk about what phase 3 looks like. Alright guys, well it seems like on a cloudy day today, this is about the most that we're going to get out of the output. Now I've got, at this point in time, both air conditioners running, a refrigerator, a freezer, a blower motor, and then just like charging some basic batteries or whatever. We're at this point in time running around, you know, you can see 1200-ish watts, and you know, at some points there we were bringing in around 2400 watts. If that was the case, at this point in time, you know, we would be banking half of what we're consuming. Right now we're, you know, covering what we're consuming, so we are putting more in the bank, if you will. But yeah, so I think that's about all we're going to get out of test results today. So let's go into what I'm going to call my planning for phase 3, and I could really use your guys' input on this. And you let me know what you think and see if you think that this is a good idea. So with this new setup, I'm thinking I should be utilizing a combiner box. And this looks like a good option. 4 in, 2 out. We need 2 out to supply the 2 inputs for the Pecron unit. And one of the main reasons I want to go to this is because I should be upsizing to 8 gauge. I'd like to go to 6 gauge just because it gives me more flexibility for the future, and I know it can definitely handle whatever I'm going to throw at it. And these MC4 connectors, in the best case scenario, are rated for 30 amps. And if we get at or near that, we're really kind of taxing the wire out. Now, there's another one that would be better for the future, and it's at the bottom here. It is the 8 in, 4 out. Now, I was considering in the future doing an EG4 XP12000 inverter, and that's what you would want for something like that. Or even if I did something different with the charge controller, this would give me flexibility to do some different things with 8 solar inputs and 4 out. Plus we get surge protection, fuses, and breakers and all that jazz. I think it's a very good deal. This one would be $270, but they're showing that it's not available on their site or something's wrong with their site. So if you know, like, has this been discontinued or is it out of stock? What's the deal? Because, you know, this is a thing. I just, you know, when you click on their site, it says oops something or other, but it shows the price and all that. So I think this is a combiner box that I want to get, and I'm going to run 10 gauge solar inputs to this, and then I would like to run either 8 or 6 gauge out from here, going into the Pecron unit. And, you know, people have highlighted it is a long run. We've talked about that. It's, you know, about 160 feet. But wanting to use this larger wire creates another issue. The XT60 connector, I would not feel comfortable wiring 6 or 8 gauge to that. But they make an adapter that goes from the XT60 to the XT90 connector. The XT90 is much larger, and those are definitely made to do 8 gauge, and you could manage to do 6 gauge if you chose to. So I think that would make it a lot safer because the wires wouldn't be so close to where you'd be worrying about potential shorting or anything like that. And I think this is a better option than doing multiple connectors that have maybe 10 gauge wires or whatever. I think that this is the optimal way to go. So that's what I've got laid out. Let me know what you guys think. If you have any comments or suggestions on things I can do. Obviously, we're probably going to be doing some higher wattage bifacial panels. There's a lot of options that we can do, but I think we're going to be limited by these MC4 connectors and by these XT60 connectors. So I think that's where a combiner box would come in, and an adapter like this would come in, and then also a wiring upgrade from, you know, the array or the combiner box into the Pecron unit. That's all we got on this one. See you all on the next one.